Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, my co-host Mikah Sargent, and we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about this week, including tiny flying microchips and the team behind them. Also, we get some hands-on impressions of some of the new Microsoft Surface hardware that was announced at their event yesterday. Square apparently went down last weekend, and restaurant workers were not happy. It impacted them greatly. And finally, files, folders, and hierarchy, and how we take it all for granted. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 202, recorded Thursday, September 23rd, 2021.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, an original podcast from Red Hat that tells the epic true tales of developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are revolutionizing the technology landscape. Season 8 is out now. Search for Command Line Heroes on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And by Plextrac, the powerful yet simple security management platform that helps you to get the real cybersecurity work done. With Plextrac, you'll streamline your assessments, analytics, and reporting. Visit plextrac.com/twit and claim your free month.
And by Akamai. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. To deliver and protect your digital experiences worldwide, tap into Akamai for its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability. Visit akamai.com/TNW today to learn more. Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell. And I got to say, Mikah, I'm psyched about your top story. This is super cool stuff.
Yes,
amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we've got, all these new phones being announced, and they have foldable screens in some cases. The latest iPhones have better cameras and processors, and that's fine. But let's talk about the smallest ever human-made flying structure. This is such a cool story, and we are joined today by Professor John Rogers of the Robert R. McCormick School of Engineering and Applied Science at Northwestern. Whew, I tried to say that all in one breath. Welcome to the show, Professor John.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, guys.
Hi. Yes, I know you are very busy as this piece is getting out there, and you probably have call after call. So we will get started here, kicking things off. First, can you go ahead and talk about just this winged microchip on its own, kind of what this is, what has been created by you incredible folks at Northwestern at all, please?
Yeah, sure. So just as a quick background, I'm on the faculty here, and so I run a fairly large interdisciplinary research group. Most of what we do is kind of at the boundaries between engineering and medicine. And so we've been interested in very tiny wireless devices that can integrate with the skin or implant into the body to monitor brain activity, physiological processes, that kind of thing. And we've for a while now sort of appreciated the potential for those same type of technology platforms to be used for environmental monitoring the atmosphere or properties of the groundwater, monitoring, chemical spills during remediation efforts and so on. But the challenge there is in dispersal. For the human body, you can laminate a device onto the skin or you inject it, into the depth of the body. But for large scale, meaningful monitoring of the environment, you'd like to be able to take those devices and disperse them over wide areas or configure them so that they would remain aloft in the environment, in the atmosphere, for example, to monitor particulate pollution or airborne pathogens, that kind of thing. And so that was kind of the context for the project that we've been able to pursue, and what we'll talk about today is how do you add flight to very small scale pieces of electronics, sensors, radios, power supply systems, and so on. And so that was the context and what we were hoping to achieve with this research.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the most amazing things there is that you have figured out how to sort of mimic nature, or as the Northwestern article quotes, we think that we beat nature, sort of taking this and iterating on it. One of the things I was kind of struck by was how small this technology is, because, I mean, if you could first kind of talk about the inspiration of those, back where I'm from in the Midwest, those nice little whirly gigs that fall from the sky as those seeds get planted. But I didn't realize that this technology could sort of be on a miniature scale too, and still be able to have that same aerodynamic effect. So can you talk about your inspiration here, and then maybe a little bit about the physics of this much smaller design?
Yeah, that's a very important point. I mean, what we wanted to do is create, flight in structures that could be scaled to very small dimensions, because that's kind of represents the overall dominating trend in the development of electronics technologies, really size miniaturization. As you make things smaller, you can reduce the cost, for example. In this context, we envision in the future, deploying thousands of these devices over large areas, and they could, form a wireless network and so on. And so making them small is important in order to make this whole concept kind of economically viable. But the inspiration, it does derive from biology. I mean, we were thinking about, how would you, aerially disperse these devices? And the first thing you might think about is, how would you create flapping wings, so that the microchips could fly away like a mosquito or a gnat or something like that. And I think maybe that's a longer term aspiration. You can imagine that's very difficult from a technical standpoint. But other, organisms in the biological world do things through passive flight, which can also be really valuable. In particular, plants and trees, as you mentioned, maple seeds have a winged type of geometry that induces a rotational flight dynamics that reduces the falling speed and increases thereby the time duration with which the seeds can interact with ambient patterns of airflow, wind, to increase the distance for dispersal from the source, from the tree itself. And you think about cottonwood trees or dandelions, there are all kinds of different sort of flight dynamics principles that have been incorporated directly into these wind dispersed seeds driven by evolutionary forces, right? And so we figured, well, maybe we could adapt and extend and modify those kinds of ideas to disperse our very tiny electronic sensor technologies. And so that's what we've done. A lot of the paper is looking at the fundamental physics of the aerodynamics of these kinds of structures, but not at the size scale of seeds. Maple seeds are pretty big, maybe a couple of inches long, but at much smaller dimensions to take advantage of the size reductions and miniaturization efforts that are happening in consumer electronics gadgetry and integrated circuit chips. And so there are principles in aerodynamics that scale nicely down as you reduce dimensions. But at some point, if you make these structures too small, then that flight dynamics kind of disappears and everything behaves like a sphere, essentially. So we push the sizes down to the millimeter scale, where we can still capture that helicopter rotational flight dynamics, but at size dimensions and with features that are much smaller than you would see in seeds.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I was reading in this in the article of talking about the study was that where you've got sort of seed dispersal as a factor of making sure that these trees can sort of go out and be in a lot of places. Here, part of the goal is to keep these in the air for longer so that you can track things like air pollution. What are some of the sort of what are some of the uses of this technology that maybe are different from just sort of dispersing something onto the ground in a location?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's sort of two envisioned modes of use. One in which the devices are doing the sensing after they land on the ground. So monitoring, heavy metal contamination in groundwater, for example. We have, strategies for doing that, measuring cadmium, mercury, lead, those kinds of species, in the groundwater. Other things as well, pH and so on. The other set of applications sort of refer to your point, which is, measuring airborne species, chemicals, biological pathogens, particulate pollution, and so on. And if that's your goal, you really are interested in designing flying structures that remain aloft, in the air as long as possible. So seeds, I think, are doing that for purposes of lateral dispersal, sort of maximizing the distance over which they travel before they land on the ground. Our motivation is a little bit different. It's like keep these things in the air so that they can engage with these airborne, sensing targets for as long as possible. And so those are the two aspects. In some ways, they're synergistic. There's some sort of common elements in how you do the aerodynamic design, but the ways that you're doing the sensing and the goals are a little bit different.
So, the new iPhone just was announced. It's coming out tomorrow. And one of the things that Apple showed off on stage was that they've sort of miniaturized some of the internal components to make the battery bigger so that it has all-day battery life. I look at this thing. It's already as small as a carpenter ant's head, and the technology packed into it is even smaller than that. How does this thing have any power at all? What are we working with here to make this thing work?
Yeah, power supply is a real challenge, obviously. So there are a couple of different, fully formed devices that we reported in this paper. And just to take a step back, this is the first time these concepts have been introduced. And so we're at the very early stages of developing, a suite of capabilities, in this class of technology. But we demonstrated two things. One is a class of device that doesn't require any power at all. It's not electronic. It's providing a sensing function based on a color change associated with a particular chemical reagent that responds through a color change to a species of interest in the environment. And so we demonstrated pH and heavy metal sensing using those kind of color change principles. And in that type of device, you do wireless readout with high resolution digital imagery that can be captured with a drone, for example. So that's one way to just sidestep the issue of power supply completely. All the wireless capability and the power is embodied in the reader unit, essentially, high resolution digital camera. The other, platform that we demonstrated is fully electronic and digital in its operation. And we built it to operate based on a combination of power sources. One is solar. So it's powered by sunlight that's striking the device. And the other, which supports wireless data communication, is that we harvest wirelessly transmitted power from an external reader unit. So it's similar to the kind of NFC wireless payment schemes that are built into phones these days, but capable of operating over a much longer distance.
Excellent. All right. One final question for you that is addressed in the article. I think people look and they see, oh, look at that little ladybug, and there's this tiny little microchip next to it, and a carpenter ant, and then they start to go, oh, but there's a little microchip laying on the ground next to a ladybug and a carpenter ant. Let's talk about EWaste. What are some of the implications here, and what has your team sort of considered in this dispersal unit and all of the involved issues?
Yeah, super important issue and a consideration that has to be, prioritized in the development of any kind of technology like this. And I would say that if we didn't think we had an answer to that question, we probably wouldn't have even worked in this direction, because I think the potential for, massive, adverse effects associated with electronic waste in this kind of platform would be significant. So there we were able to tap into a set of electronic materials that we've developed for temporary implants. So they're sort of like resorbable sutures in a sense, that they dissolve away when exposed to biofluid slowly over time, but they have the capability for supporting all kinds of electronic functionality, wireless communication, wireless power harvesting, digital sensing, and so on. And we can exploit those same collections of materials and fabrication techniques and device designs in these, environmentally, distributed sensors. And so we've demonstrated that as well. Devices that just degrade into the environment to benign end products, so they just naturally disappear. And you can engineer them to, satisfy particular operating lifetime requirements. So maybe they operate for a couple of months and then they completely degrade and disappear harmlessly into the environment over the subsequent several months. So this is very much a viable solution and an answer to that very important question about electronic waste.
Awesome. Well, Professor John Rogers, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us. I wish you the best. And the remaining calls you have, as you have reached a feat of human mechanical and biological understanding. It's incredible. Of course, folks can head over to the link we'll include in the show notes to learn more about this. And this study also got the cover on September 23rd's issue of Nature, which is awesome. Where should folks go if they want to continue to follow your work?
They can go to my research group website. It's hosted at northwestern.edu. So just Google it. It'll come right up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Up next, Microsoft had a bunch of new products launch yesterday. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about Command Line Heroes, who are sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Command Line Heroes is an original podcast from Red Hat, and it tells the epic true tales of developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are revolutionizing the technology landscape. It offers a unique blend of historical context and current trends shaping the tech landscape. This season tackles one question from every angle. What is a robot? Is a robot a servant, a factory worker, a prosthetic, a vehicle? Why do we build robots that look like us? And we often ask whether we can trust robots. But maybe the question we should ask is, can robots trust us? Science fiction tells us many stories about robots. In the future, they will serve our every need, or maybe they'll develop a mind of their own and turn against us. Maybe they will be the savior of humanity, or they'll be our downfall. Season 8 of Command Line Heroes covers the robots that are in our midst and the determined dreamers who bring them to life. 8 episodes compare the promise of science fiction to the reality of robots today. I had the opportunity to listen to the first episode, Robot as Servant. And of course, it as are all episodes of Command Line Heroes. This one was really interesting. So we're going to share a clip.
While making this season, we discovered a robot reality that's pretty removed from the robots we imagined. And yet, all those misguided ideas about what a robot should be actually shaped what robots are. And no robot fiction shaped things more than the story we told ourselves about robotic servants.
Ooh, very exciting. I love Command Line Heroes. Seriously, not only do they have these brilliantly produced episodes that are just these snackable, delicious bits of really interesting topics, but if we go to that website, look at the beautiful artwork that they produce for every single season of Command Line Heroes. I think it's incredible that for every season of Command Line Heroes, the theme, the website gets redone. I just like to go there sometimes, just sort of scroll through and see what's going on because I just am so amazed by it. This award-winning podcast, that's right, award-winning, is hosted by Sargent and it's produced by Red Hat. Season 8 is out now. You can search for Command Line Heroes on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we'll also include a link in the show notes for you to check it out. And of course, our thanks to Command Line Heroes for their support of this show. All righty, Jason, tell us what's going on next.
Well, what's going on next is Microsoft. Microsoft had a big event, online event. You know, it seems like we're in the midst of hardware season right now. Anyone who's reviewing technology feels it, that's for sure. So I'm sure that's totally the case with Cherlynn Low from Engadget, who's here right now to talk with us about the new Surface hardware that Microsoft announced. And primarily because, Cherlynn, you got some hands-on time with some of this stuff. I did not. So I'm super curious to know what you think about it. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, always great to get you on. Thank you for taking some time. I know you're busy today, so we'll get right to it. Let's start with the bigger device, the Surface Laptop Studio. Seemed like people are pretty excited about this. Obviously, it seemed like it was a big standout from the event. Talk a little bit about what you think makes this particular laptop special.
I mean, it's special if you consider the history of Microsoft attempting its sort of convertible laptop tablet hybrid with the Surface Book series, right? I mean, that line recently just got a lot of criticism for it's meant to be a powerful device. It's meant to be for, creators. They'll show you a lot of artists or people with graphics intensive workflows. So it should come with correspondingly beefy components. But because of the Surface Book's design, which was a detachable tablet and laptop, there were constraints for Microsoft where they had to make sure part of the battery was in the tablet or the screen side of things. They had only the only the GPU in the keyboard base. So if you took it away from the keyboard, you were, using only integrated stuff with the CPU on the other side of the thing. So it was limited, right? The Laptop Studio is going to replace the Surface Book line, and it's still a 2-in-1. In fact, maybe you can call it a 3-in-1, and it'll, slide forward and flatten down if you need to become a tablet, or, when it slides forward, you can also sort of prop it up in front of the keyboard to use just the touch screen more directly. And because of this, in general, I think it's easier for Microsoft to include components. Now, it was weird, though, because that if you're a spec nerd or a chip nerd, you might be upset that Microsoft still can't go up to higher than a quad-core CPU on the Laptop Studio. So it looks like we might have to see or watch Microsoft figure this out in future, but that form factor alone is eye-catching. It's not new by any means. Not only has Microsoft itself done something similar with the Surface Studio desktop all-in-one with sort of this easel hinge kind of a thing. We've also seen PC makers like HP and Acer use this in their laptops, in their thinner laptops. So HP Elite Folio is like an ultra portable with a similar, hinge kickstand design. So it is eye-catching, the Laptop Studio. It's nice that Microsoft is doing this. It's not new, but I think the story here with Microsoft attempting to make something work is what's so intriguing about it.
And you mentioned just a couple of times there Hinge, which as I've watched, I mean, I realize this isn't really a foldable, right? Like there have been laptops, that hinge forever and ever. But I feel like the Hinge is like this unsung hero that suddenly in the last couple of years, people care a lot about, with foldables especially. They're like, oh my goodness, check out this Hinge. It's amazing technology. But it seemed like people got very excited about the Hinge here, the dynamic woven hinge. You actually, in your hands-on, had at least a little bit of a kind of snag in your experience with a hinge. What makes it so special, and what did you think about it in use?
Yeah, I'm not one for marketing terms like dynamic woven hinge. Really, what's that supposed to mean, really? But totally. I think the hinge you're referring to, because there are two here, right? There is the one that is the traditional laptop hinge where it keeps the screen connected to the keyboard part of things. And then there's that, I guess, dynamic woven hinge that, keeps the screen in its frame and then allows it to flip over to face forward. And this is midway through the lid. So it swivels on this hinge. And my issue with it was that it seemed a little too easy for the screen to pop out of the frame. When I'm trying to pull it towards me, that's good. But when I flip the screen around to face out and then I push the top of it down to push it, to be at a gentler angle, it popped right back out of the screen again. There's certain configurations in which I think that hinge feels a little just maybe too loose. I don't know if that's the word for it. It's just, it unpops easily. It pops out of the frame easily, at least based on my quick hands-on. But yeah, no, you're totally right though. Everyone's obsessed with hinges now. I love, there was a period of time when we were just getting to know foldable phones where every company was like, listen to us talk about our hinge because it separates us from the rest of the people. And that wasn't sure. But Microsoft has been in the hinge business for a long time because the Surfaces with their kickstands have had good hinges for a long time. So I love it. I love that we're talking about hinges now, but right. I'm sure it'll go away soon.
The Hinge discussion is unhinged, let me tell you.
Oh,
sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Jason.
I couldn't help myself. Look, I'm a dad.
I'm
it's
leaving.
what I bring
Bye.
to this show.
Bye.
All right. Come back. I didn't mean to scare you away. Talk about the touchpad a little bit, because I know it's a haptic touchpad as opposed to kind of like a mechanical click. And I got to say, like, I've got the MacBook Pro that has the haptic, and it took me a long time to get used to it. I still don't know that I necessarily prefer it over the latter. But did you get a chance to play around with it, and what do you think?
I'm not entirely sure that the Laptop Studio's touchpad is haptic, because if you're talking about something like a force touch situation like a MacBook, I wasn't alerted to it by the people at the demo, so I didn't test. I did test a haptic pen, the Slim Pen 2. And also I'll caveat all of this by saying that it was a hot mess at the event, because there were like something like 200 devices with 45 minutes to cover everything, like the Duo 2, the Laptop Studio, all of that. In 45 minutes, I didn't touch much of it. So unfortunately, I didn't get to test this specific feature of the trackpad out, if that's what you're saying, Jason.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see it in person. I mean, in the real world to get a feel for it.
That could be my misunderstanding. I thought that it was a haptic trackpad. So if I got that wrong, that's on me. So my apologies. Let's talk a little bit about the smaller Surface Pro 8.
Yeah.
They had a number of these laptops, but this is definitely a redesign.
Yes.
What struck you about this laptop based on your time with that?
I came into this hands-on appointment thinking, like, okay, this whole thing, the main thing is it's redesigned to look like the Pro X. And if you know the Surface Pro series well, you'll know that they've more or less had this, like, by now outdated look with very thick bezels around the screen and very squarish design, kind of slightly chunky. You know what you're going to get when you buy a Surface or a Surface Pro. They haven't changed in design a lot in recent years. The Surface Pro 8 basically adopts the design of the Pro X, which was released in the last 2 years. And the Pro X was an ARM-based Surface Pro running or using a Microsoft SQ1, or in the more recent generation SQ2 chipset that Microsoft co-designed with Qualcomm, right? It's basically a Microsoft chip that had Snapdragon DNA. It was the wording they used. And what that enabled them to do was, because a chip, like an ARM-based chip, is just so much more power efficient, they could do away with like as big of a battery and, really slim things down. So what happened with the Pro 8 is that in adopting that design, basically you're getting the thinnest Surface Pro I think we've ever seen. Also, the bezels are just like so much narrower. Thank goodness. I mean, it looks really nice. I will say, if you miss having some place to put your thumb, you will love the thicker bezels of the older Surface Pros. And if you're that person and you still want like a new Surface Pro with this year's chips, there is the Surface Pro 7 Plus, which still has the thick ass, can I say ass?
Sure.
Yes.
The thick ass borders, the bezels around. So anyway, you've got me on a ranty mood. I'm going on and on. You just feel free to stop me.
I love it. Honestly, when you put out your review, put thick ass bezels in there, and I think you'll get a lot of reads.
I think I could get away with it. Yes,
I think you could. Who knows? We might even title this episode that as well. Now, I want to direct ourselves away from the laptops and go to something that's near and dear to my heart. I'm an Android guy. I'm very curious about the Surface Duo 2, the Surface Duo 1. Let's just say it was ambitious, but it actually ended up, kind of letting a lot of people down. Leo, of course, he bought one. He ended up sending it back. He really did not like it. Ultimately, it did not satisfy his whatever he was looking for, and for a number of reasons. But it seems like this device, they've really made some significant changes. Makes sense. It's a Series 2. It's the second version of this. Did you, in your experience, what did you see in your hands-on time with this that could potentially overwrite or alleviate any of your concerns based on the previous device?
So a lot of the discourse around this has been that hardware was never the original Duo's major problem. The only real hardware issue that was limiting the original Duo was its camera being a lower quality sensor and camera than everyone else's, right? Especially at that price. It was like this 10-ish megapixel sensor, and there was just one of it, and there's just not enough versatility in there for that price, honestly. Just no, right? And so the big change here for that on the Duo 2 is the triple rear camera system. And you've got like 12 megapixels. Here you got an ultra wide, a telephoto. Typical, basically, you know, you're catching up to the flagship phones. And for a phone that's costing that much, it's a bit more like the value you're expecting to get now. Question is, like, my issue with it is like, I didn't even realize this until I started playing with the cameras, is that like, in the past, on the original Duo, when you want to take a photo, you just flip the camera was above one of the screens on the inside, and you would flip it to face you if you wanted to take a selfie, and then flip it to face outwards if you wanted to shoot the world. And you know, that caused the software to just bug out. It just, to quote our friend Mr. Mobile Michael Fisher, it shat the bed, and it was just like, couldn't understand how you were holding, just freaking out on you all the time. So the one benefit that this triple camera system brings is that now you have a proper rear camera, and then like there's still a front camera. So the Duo 2 doesn't have to do all that thinking anymore. It can calm down. But this also does mean that when you're taking a photo with the rear cameras, you have to at least have the device kind of open. You can't have it lay flat and flush with the two screens back to back anymore, and use it sort of like a phone size device to take photos. It's basically going to be embarrassing for anyone that doesn't want to hold up like a tablet style device to take photos. So enjoy that.
Definitely a more cumbersome experience. I feel like I've experienced that with some of the other foldables, you know, some of Samsung's foldables, where it has to be, you know, like the Z Fold 3 if you're actually taking a picture on the Z Fold 3 with certain cameras, it does need to be unfolded all the way. And just in that configuration, it just feels too big and almost fragile, delicate. Like, you got to be really careful when you're taking that picture, because it would be really easy for it to slip out of your hands. So not what you want on an expensive device like this. You mentioned software. That's my biggest concern too. You know, really, when it comes down to it, last year's model, yes, the cameras sucked, but also the internals were really underpowered, at least compared to what was high end, you know, or top of the line at the time. And I think right now we're starting to see foldables finally, you know, realize like, hey, you know, people are paying a lot of money for these. Yes, they're paying for the foldable aspect, but they should also get the latest and greatest processor, because people expect that out of a really expensive device. So at least we're seeing that. Do you envision, or even in your experience or time with this, some of the clunkiness that we saw in the first one, is that alleviated because of this? I know, you know, Android also has made some serious improvements over the last year for compatibility with foldable devices, but what's your take there?
Yeah. So one thing that, you know, on the Android front, it will now be running Android 11, right? And then I think we heard today that Microsoft will be bringing Android 11 down to the original Duo soon, by the end of this year. That alone could make a lot of the software issues be a little less annoying. And I have to say that I didn't encounter a single issue during my hands-on time with the Duo 2. But limited. I had such little time. I like swiped through screens. I maybe opened 2 apps side by side. I took one app and I, you know, opened it across 2 screens. Those things worked well. They were fast. I didn't try to type anything yet, right? I mean, that's when the issues came up for me a lot of the time. Was anytime I tried to use the keyboard, it was awful. Anytime I tried to like have 2 apps side by side, but then flip orientations midway through, that would throw up a problem. So I need more time with the Duo 2 in the real world to see how good the software is, because sometimes it's just buried in the little things that you do day to day that these software bugs appear. But one introduction to the software that Microsoft did with the Duo 2 is that peak or glance little bar thing. I don't know if you noticed that, Jason.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great addition. Yeah.
I think it's cool. I like the way it lights up, very futuristic looking. I don't know how much use we're going to get out of that. It's good that you can at least see that there's a notification, but, you know, do you want to, like, I envision myself just sitting with the phone closed or the Duo 2 closed on my couch, right? And I have it on the table somewhere in the distance. And it just blinks and I'm like, oh, is that something I want to look at? Like, you know, like, do I get up? Do I, like, it's, I feel like there's still more testing to be done for sure, but cautiously, it looks good for now, yeah.
Yeah. I think they're good upgrades. Still very expensive, but yeah, that's just the way of the world right now with these foldables, I suppose. Cherlynn, always a pleasure getting you on. Thanks so much for sharing your insight.
Sorry I talked so much today.
That's why we bring you on to talk, so we appreciate it. If people want to follow your work, obviously, I imagine you're going to be the one at Engadget to be reviewing at least some of these devices, so folks should go to engadget.com and check in on that. But if they want to find you online and follow you, where can they find you?
You can follow me. I'm at Cherlynn Low on Twitter, and all my other info is there as well.
Right on, Cherlynn. You're awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right. Bye. Okay, up next, Mikah's story of the week, and then mine a little bit later. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Plextrac. This is the security management platform that brings you better reports. It brings you deeper assessments, more insights. It brings it all. Do you spend hours and hours reporting security issues and, in the midst of all of that, feel like you're getting nowhere with it? Well, maybe you're buried in data, but you can't get a full picture of your security posture. You need to prioritize all of that remediation that you're doing, and it's hard to get in front of that. Well, we've got a solution for you. It's Plextrac. Plextrac empowers continuous assessment, automated workflow, and effective collaboration between teams. And that's going to help cybersecurity professionals do so much more in so much less time. You can create assessment reports in half the time, in fact, and you can centralize your remediation efforts across all scans, your assessments, your audits, all through powerful risk visualizations. You got scanner and ticketing integrations, enhanced analytics that are going to make your communication evaporate the risks in real time. It's amazing. Whether red or blue, there is a Plextrac for every security professional to save time and to get the right work done. So your red teams they can import findings from numerous vulnerability scanners. They can include screenshots and videos, all complete with auto formatting even. Create customized templates and export to Word with a single click. You can also streamline the report writing process to deliver better reports even faster. And then your blue teams, they can customize internal and external assessment questionnaires, synchronize findings with task management tools like Jira Cloud, assign findings to team members and track status over time, and even provide attestation of security posture with robust analytics. So whether you're a small to medium-sized security consultancy, maybe you're a full-scale MSSP or a large enterprise, security teams of all sizes and specialties are going to work more effectively, more efficiently with Plextrac. Plextrac is the premier cybersecurity workflow management and reporting platform for every professional, from practitioner to CISO. There's truly a Plextrac for every security team. Plextrac improves the entire security management lifecycle, makes it easy to generate security reports, deliver them securely, and track the issues to completion straight from the platform. And you can actually check it out. You can book a demo today and see what it's all about. Try Plextrac free for 1 month, and you can see how it's going to change your life as a security professional. Simply go to plextrac.com/twit and claim your free month. That's plextrac.com, plextrac.com/TWIT. And we thank Plextrac for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, Mikah, what you got with your story of the week?
All right. This is a bit of a bummer story, but bear with me here because I think that it's definitely worth talking about. The Washington Post published an article talking about Square, which many of you might be familiar with as the method by which you pay for your coffee or your bagel or other different restaurants and service industry things. And according to the Washington Post, and also speaking to several different restaurant workers and baristas and small shop owners over the weekend, as we record the show, this past Saturday, a glitch in Square's payment processing system resulted in the automated, it automatically pops up the tip page, not popping up for a period of up to 3 hours. So that means that folks on Saturday morning, which is especially for baristas and other coffee shop folks, the time when they are most busy and maybe make quite a bit of money in tips, they were not making quite a bit of money in tips. This, of course, is exacerbated by the fact that multiple companies, but also the CDC itself and many groups have encouraged, or in some cases required, to the extent they're allowed, to stop actual cashless payments and instead do contactless payments. So normally, you'd go in, you'd buy your coffee, you'd tap your phone, and you'd go on to the next thing. But because of that, folks weren't reminded about the ability to tip. Square does a really nice thing where you just can see, three different tip options, and then an other option you easily tap and you kind of move through the process. It makes tipping very easy. And as the Washington Post points out in their article, some workers make as little as this is ridiculous. Some workers make as little as $2.13 an hour in direct wages, as they are expected to make the rest of that up in tips. Yeah. $2.13 an hour. And then you have a period of time where tips aren't an option as far as the contactless method. I don't know about you, but against the advice of counsel and family and friends, don't carry cash with me. And so even if I wanted to give a tip, I would have not in this situation been able to because I didn't have any cash to give as a tip. So this is troubling because, again, it's one of these situations where our reliance on technology and companies' reliance on technology has resulted in sort of a downside for its workers. And when there's a great quote in this piece, and I'm trying to find it now. There we go. It's precisely moments like this where workers reach their breaking point, said Saru Jayaraman, president of One Fair Wage, a national worker advocacy group. So you also have a situation where, we've seen complaints about employment being difficult at this time, and issues with workers across the United States and elsewhere who have significant and legitimate concerns about their job and everything involved with that. You have this situation where this kind of thing could be the breaking point for some folks that says, you know what, this is not working for me. And when you're making $2.13 an hour and expected to make the rest up in tips, 1,000 billion% can't blame someone for wanting to sort of say, what am I even doing? So, this was Square Square said that they were resolving the issue, and this is the quote from them. For about 3 hours on Saturday, September 18th, our systems experienced an issue that prevented some sellers from being able to sign into their accounts or accept tips. We understand how important it is to never miss a sale and how critical tip collection can be for our sellers' teams. They went on to apologize and share some details on how they were going to prevent similar incidents in the future. 3 hours is a long time when it's compounded by the number, when it's multiplied by the number of companies that are making use of Square. It's just, it's really, it's quite wild how ridiculous, how much of an effect this has. And it's especially, because I know I'm going a little off topic here or carrying this on a little bit long, but when we think about sort of other ways of taking payment, and for some folks, it may have appeared as if everything was working fine. They were able to go through the process, and there were some different workers who reported, who talked to the Washington Post, who said, we didn't notice for hours that screen was missing. So they thought it was business as usual. And then at the end of the day, when it came time to, figure out tips and everything, then that was whenever they had the realization that, oh, that whole time we weren't collecting tips because there was something wrong with Square's app. And this was because of an automatic update that was rolled out to Square's systems. So there's just so much of technology steeped in this, from automatic updates to contactless payments to all of these things that on the whole are super convenient and in the case of the pandemic, safer and good in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways. But then we've got this downside that really is like, we don't want this to happen. We want to be able to celebrate the technology for making things better. And frankly, I think in some cases, making tips more frequent, because you can just boop, 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 tap right through and you're good to go, versus sort of just paying with your card and then pulling out separately some cash to put in or what have you. So normally I think that, this technology can be a good thing, but here it's really one of those situations where it's like, this cannot happen. It needs to not happen. 3 hours, 5 hours, 1 hour, it doesn't matter. I hope that Square, whatever it's, it listed the details of what it's going to do to try to prevent this. I hope that they really get on that and make sure that if an automatic update rolls out, it doesn't affect that part of the payment system that is so important to the livelihood of so many people. I mean, a day's worth of tips lost could be the difference between some people being able to pay their rent or not. And yeah, in that case, this is just not good.
Not good. I worked in the restaurant industry. I know if I had encountered this, especially right now, like now is such a strange time for workers in general, but especially workers in restaurants and like these customer facing positions, but especially in restaurants, because you're serving food. You don't know whether it's, there's questions about the safety of serving food, either indoors or outdoors, whatever. People, fall in different categories as far as masking and not, having to enforce that. There's all of these external pressures. And then you have, like you mentioned, so many states allow for restaurants to pay their workers a very low wage because they assume that their tip income is going to make up the difference. And thankfully here in California, at least when I was working in the restaurant industry at the turn, 98 through or about 2000 through like 2005, I mean, their hourly wages were reasonable here. I know that it's not that way in other states. A lot of other states it's really low. So, at least in some states they get it. I mean, this is all about like giving your employees the ability to live their lives. And right now, when in a time where we're trying to encourage people to return to work, and it's actually very difficult. I was just talking with a friend who owns a restaurant here in Petaluma, and he was just telling me how difficult the last couple of years has been on hiring. And now he's finally getting people coming through the door again, but they're all brand new, totally green to and that brings its own host of challenges. And then you have something like this, where it's like an entire day's work is gone and you didn't realize it. In a bygone era, we had these little swipe things for credit cards for when the system went down. You could at least default and go back to that. And I don't know if they still have those in restaurants or barista, coffee shops like what they're talking about in this article, but some sort of fallback, because the fact of the matter is technology fails. Technology will fail at some point. It's never 100% perfect, and that sucks, but it's the way it is. So what is the system to kind of protect against that? Yes, but also kind of create a soft landing for when it does happen. And it sounds like here, a lot of the businesses had to actually pay the employees because of the failure of the technology. And that puts pressure on the businesses. That's undue because, hey, it was Square's fault. So yeah, it's super unfortunate. As we rely more and more on bringing a phone as our payment method and not bringing cash, because I'm the same as you, Mikah. I don't carry cash with me, and I haven't for a very long time. I hate cash. I hate paying with cash and having to carry it. So I'd much rather just have like either a card or pay with my phone at this point. But it does pose a problem in this particular situation. I'd feel pretty guilty if I got something and then realized I couldn't tip. That sucks.
Yeah, I don't like it. So I guess, just be mindful of these payment platforms whenever you are using them. And if that tip section doesn't show up, you might ask, hey, there's no option to leave a tip here. Is everything okay? Right. Because that could give somebody the awareness that they needed to sort of fix the problem if possible. And I was just thinking about how there's a company called Toast that I have experienced at a few restaurants where they've brought me the receipt and there's a QR code on the receipt. I scan the QR code and I can pay right there, add the tip, and then leave. There's no further interaction with the person that's, the server. And thinking about that system and how if that system had gone down and there was something wrong there, that also would be a bad situation. So yeah, I don't know. For us who are making use of these tools, I hope that we can be more mindful if something seems to be going wrong, and hopefully Square itself will do a better job of making sure that it's working as it's expected to, and that it has some things in place to make sure that happens. And as our TD John has mentioned, it would be even better to move away from tips in general. There are lots of other countries who do a fine job of not using tips as a means to make sure their workers get the wage that they need, and instead just pay a livable wage in the first place. And so that is one solution to the problem. That's a quite good solution to the problem, frankly.
Employers are many employers are going to have a hard time with that, because that puts the burden on them instead of the people walking through the door. And I'm not saying that as like an argument against that. I totally agree. It's just, it's so deeply entrenched in the culture. It's a really hard thing to change. Yeah. I am curious though, before we move on, because I hadn't thought about it until now, I'm curious to know what the impact on the amount that people are tipping has been as we've moved away from cash and more towards digital, where it's something on a screen where you can go, oh, 15%, oh, 20%, or whatever, versus like doing the math in our head and like pulling out the bills and being like, well, I only have a 5 and 2 1s, so here you go. I wonder if that's increased tips or decreased it. And I don't know. I don't know that we have the answer to that, but I'm curious.
Yeah. All right, folks. Last but certainly not least, we've got Jason's story of the week. But before that, I want to tell you about Akamai, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. Would you like to deliver extraordinary customer experiences and run code at the edge? Well, Akamai is truly powerful and can do that for you, because Akamai has 10 times the locations of the nearest competitor. That's more than 4,000 locations. You are always closer to your end user with Akamai, significantly cutting down on latency. Akamai will also greatly improve customer experience, because your customers will get the content, apps, sites, and video they need without lag, interruption, or latency during unexpected traffic spikes. You can prepare for spikes in demand and optimize resources to provide the best experience for your customers. Frankly, you'll be amazed at Akamai's unparalleled performance, and you'll always be one network hop away from 85% of the world's internet users. That is just incredible. You may ask, what about scalability? Well, application architects get the flexibility to scale enterprise applications with Akamai Edge Workers. With Edge Workers, your development teams can focus on building while letting Akamai take care of the challenges of scaling globally. And because Akamai empowers you to deploy serverless code at the edge, you won't experience the headaches of increased traffic at origin or the overheads that go with it. Akamai gives you the power to innovate right there at the edge, because your logic and functions are deployed and active at the nearest proximity to your end users. So that way you're going to get the fastest end user experience around the globe. And Akamai makes it simple to build right at the edge using JavaScript, so you can innovate in real time, and optimization of your API traffic delivery for edge applications. But what's the cost? Well, even with its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability, Akamai is comparatively priced. Because limits are set per request, you can be sure your workload will scale no matter the size of your user base. And being serverless, means you'll see decreased overhead at origin too. You know Akamai and their reputation. They're trusted by the biggest brands in the world, and you're getting 10 times the locations of competitors for the fastest customer experience available. So check out the Akamai website to learn more about edge computing, have a conversation with them, and you might be surprised by just how competitive the pricing is. Build closer to your end user with Akamai, the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. Visit akamai.com/TNW today to learn more. Please use that URL so they know you came from us. That's akamai.com/TNW. All righty, Jason. I have to say, I hopped into the spreadsheet ready to drop in my story of the week, and you had already put it in there.
Oh,
so
no
I am
way.
incredibly jealous you got here first, but I am happy to be talking about it because this is fascinating because I think I'm right at the cusp of this age group where I am firmly within the understanding how this stuff works camp, but I am close to people who firmly do not understand how this stuff works. So it's really interesting.
I love it when it works out this way, that we're both kind of on the same page. I honestly thought this was like a hidden like gem. I was like, oh, wow, cool. So what are we even talking about here? All right. So came across an article that was that's on The Verge by Monica Chin called File Not Found. And it talks about kind of the generational forces that are going to impact things like how we manage our files and folders and the file structure and the hierarchy that we manage on our computers, which is something that I think we all probably take for granted. I know I do. I mean, you know, I've been working in this file folder hierarchy paradigm so long that it's super easy to take it for granted. And I guess I never really stopped to really think about this aspect of computing because it's just so ingrained in computing in my own personal experience anyways. Obviously this paradigm comes from something like a filing cabinet, right? We've got a filing cabinet. I've got a couple downstairs, many different folders inside of those folders contain documents. It's labeled, it's sorted, it's easy to find. Oh, I need to find, you know, our mortgage statement. I go to the folder, you know, that's labeled appropriately and it's easy to find. And so when we talk about files and folders and everything on our computers, it's very similar. It was kind of built, you know, around the same kind of thought, the same kind of idea. I will say in my experience, you know, I've tried for my entire life in computing to keep these things perfectly organized as if there is some 100% solution to, you know, making sure that everything is neat and tidy and everything. And I always, you know, my efforts really only go so far. Better than completely, you know, a mess, but not perfect by any stretch, even though there is no such thing as perfection. It's kind of a mixture of organization and chaos is what I would say as far as my, you know, how I approach files and everything. But according to this article, there are students or, you know, people who are growing up in an era where this file approach, this file paradigm isn't necessary or isn't something that they've even considered because the systems that we have built now and the kind of the things like super powerful search being the North Star, they make it less necessary to actually consider these things, right? So students might not even really have much interaction with a filing cabinet and, you know, those manila folders. They're on their phones, let's say, navigating a mobile device, something like Instagram or TikTok. And instead of like needing to think about how to share to Instagram by finding this file on their phone that's stored in this folder and bringing it over, you know, these apps, they pull in these files automatically. It's coming from your camera roll. There's no real reference, no real need to reference any sort of file structure. It just kind of magically happens, and that's by design, right? These things have been created in a way that makes it really user-friendly for managing these things. And when it's not easy, well, we have search. Right, a lot of people, and Mikah, you probably, I'm curious to hear what you think about this. You probably fall into this category where much of your life, like search has been, like I said, the North Star. I remember this happening. I don't remember exactly when, but definitely in my time on Gmail, there was a time where my kind of mindset on how I organize all of my email shifted away from creating folders and being methodical. Oh, this has something to do with music, so drag it over there. This has something to do with work, CNET or TWiT, so drag it over there. Like being very methodical about my incoming email and sorting it and everything. And by the way, taking forever to do it because you could waste your life doing that sort of thing. That was the before. And then at some point, my paradigm shifted to where it's like, I don't throw away any emails. I don't really sort them. I might have some auto tagging or something like that. But really, when I would need to find something, I have a good idea of what I need to find. So I just do a search. And 9 times out of 10, that search is good enough for me to find it pretty quickly. Not all the time, but most of the time. And so I think, based on this article, it seems like that's kind of the mentality of what a lot of younger adults growing up right now, that's the paradigm that they've lived in. And so when it comes to this file folder hierarchy thing, it's like, what are you even talking about? I've never had to experience this. So Mikah, you were also going to put this story in. I'm curious to know what your thought is on this. I'm fascinated by this story.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's sort of it's a two-parter. It's a two pieces kind of thing, because there's understanding the whole file system directory concept, and then there's using the file system directory concept. And I, like you, understand it, but don't much make use of it these days because of search. On my iPhone, on my iPad, on my Mac, online, on Dropbox or Google Drive or what have you, I command space on the Mac to launch Spotlight. On my iPhone, when I'm launching an app, I don't go to a folder that's meticulously organized and find the app I'm looking for. I swipe down and use the built-in search feature to find it. On all of these different platforms, search is king for me. But I just, because of from whence I hail in terms of time, I am, fundamentally understanding of the file system organization and structure. And to some extent, I do make use of files that have, some level of organization. When it comes to, working on projects specifically, or different documents or different, bits of research, I'm very careful about my organization. But outside of that, yeah, I just use search tools to do that. But as this is kind of pointing out, there is a whole generation that doesn't really make use of those tools in the first place. It is not that along with not using search these days, they are also unfamiliar with that directory, as in they never used that or understood that concept. And so this was just a really fascinating story. The author of the piece was talking about how they were, I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was with the Adobe suite. And they were working in some Adobe application, and they couldn't get the font files to work. And the professor said, "Oh, you need to tell the application where the font files are stored." And the author was like, "I don't know what that means. How do I go about doing that?" And that conversation came up because a former colleague of mine and a friend of mine had reached out to the author and said, "I wonder if there's a difference." This specifically focused on STEM. I wonder if there's a difference in creative communities and in journalism communities, because she's a journalist, and if that, due to the nature of the applications that we used, me as a graphic designer years ago, and video producer, and all of the different things that I did at the time, where we did need that file structure, if the author had interviewed those folks, if that would have resulted in a different outcome. And so then they were kind of talking about how, well, I have personally came from that background, and I still didn't quite understand the file structure, the whole directory system there. So yeah, it's really interesting. And I think one of my favorite parts of this was just seeing different folks' response to this. I had fully expected that there were going to be a bunch of grouchy old folks who were going to be saying, "Kids these days,
yes, exactly,
it's so foolish." Yeah, it's so foolish that they don't understand this, and they should understand it because understanding it is important. And by understanding, they're And I really didn't see any of that. There was plenty of, sort of surprise and shock that younger folks didn't know how these original or these earlier systems worked. But it wasn't a point of that sort of boomer mentality. Sorry, boomers. Right. Boomer mentality of like, because you don't understand it, you're wrong and bad. And so I was pleasantly surprised and happy that we could see the coverage of this and folks could go, if it works for them, that's totally fine. And it's A-okay. It's not how I do it. And even I've, sort of changed over time to adapt this more search heavy feature. But just because they don't do that, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. What is interesting to me is that there are professors who are, as we talked about in this piece in general, talking about how they are sort of training students. They're having to teach students about directories and file structures. And so then it makes me wonder, is that something that will continue to be necessary, or will the sort of way of teaching change to adapt to a new approach where the file system isn't as important because that's the way that things are going in general, where you do have this sort of stream of photos and you do have this, stream of files, and you do have search to go find all of these things for you.
Really seems to me like it would be a combination of both, right? Like I think like my personal experience is that my daughter has started to teach herself how to video edit in iMovie, which is kind of blowing me away. I'm like, wow, you're 11 and you're totally editing this video, and I'm amazed at what she's coming up with. But I've noticed that through that, her desktop is just filling. It's just littered with all these files. And when she has an idea, she takes a screenshot, it appears on her desktop, she moves it in. She doesn't, obviously she doesn't think about like, oh, I've got to create a folder, in my movies folder or something that's for like video edit, media or something like that. So that was a reason for me to step in and say, hey, you're getting everything's getting really disorganized here. It could become hard for you to find something. Let me show you. And, I kind of showed her how to create a folder and name it, and kind of the idea of like what you would name that in order to find it later, and the things that would go in there and everything. And I haven't checked back in on her to see if she's like actually using that. Honestly, she's probably not. She's probably just continuing to do what she was doing. But there's an education component around it, right? And I think that's what's maybe missing, is that I guess I'm referring to me. I took that for granted because it was just kind of part of the computer experience. But now the computer experience is many other things than what I learned when I was growing up. And I don't think that any of them are right or wrong. There's just, there are a million different ways to find a file. And some of it's search, some of it's, putting in different folders. Burke in the Slack, points out that it's really good for security to have a good folder hierarchy. Certain folders you don't want accessible to other apps and everything. And maybe that's less easy to do if you have a single repository for every single file just in there, that exposes all of that stuff if someone is able to get through whatever security you have to get access to that folder. So I think it's really a combination of both. And if some of these people are just really comfortable with the search approach or with whatever is working for them, it would also be, it occurs to me, pretty valuable to know the other side of it, whether you use it or not, at least to have an understanding, because a lot of these apps that you're going to be using and everything, they are going to be using it, kind of like finding that font file. And yeah, I don't know, but maybe Adobe creates a system that makes finding that font file through the folder hierarchy completely unnecessary. It's also the industry will be shaped by these people in years down the line and whatever they're comfortable with. So things are going to change as a direct result of this. That's just the way it goes.
Yep. Things change.
Things
and
change.
People don't stay the same.
Yep. That's how it goes.
Everybody go read this piece. Go read it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's at The Verge. Look for File Not Found. That we have reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We publish every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW audio and video feeds. There we go. I was going to say files. Audio and video files can be found sorted in their folders on the directory structure that can be found at twit.tv/TNW. So subscribe there and you'll get the podcast.
Also, if you want all of our shows ad-free, you should check out Club TWiT for $7 a month. You're going to get every TWiT show with no ads. So get access to the exclusive TWiT Plus bonus feed with content you won't find anywhere else, and access to the members-only Discord server where we chat along during the show and outside of the show. Lots of different communities inside of our Discord server. It's just a fun place to be as you join us at TWiT and those folks outside of it. twit.tv/club TWiT to check it out. $7 a month. And we thank you for your support. If you would like to follow me online, you can follow me at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUAHUA.coffee, where I've got links to many of the places I'm most active online. Check out Smart Tech Today later today, and check out iOS Today this coming Tuesday, where Rosemary Orchard and I will talk about the new iPad mini and the new iPhones after we've had a chance to play with them over the weekend, so long as my delivery is made tomorrow as it should be. Jason Howell, what about you?
I'm excited for you. I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. I was on This Week in Google yesterday. Had a lot of fun with the crew there. So twit.tv/TWIG. And then, of course, all about Android, twit.tv/AAA, and other things that I get pulled into from time to time. Big thanks to John Ashley, to Burke at the studio, everyone at the studio who helps us do the show each and every week. And we couldn't do it without you. For if you weren't watching and listening, who would enjoy the show? So we appreciate that you do enjoy the show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography, but your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands-On Photography, here on TWiT. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.